Welcome, I'm Dinah Liversidge, and thank you for joining me for this seminar. Stop Your Imposter, Stopping You. Today, we're going to talk about some really excellent news. I'm going to let you know you definitely are not suffering with a syndrome when you're thinking about your imposter. I'm going to share with you why I believe your imposter is a mindset, how you can listen to that differently, and how that can allow you to take back control. We're going to just sort of get over those historical or hysterical dramas, and I'll tell you how we can change those to make what you tell yourself based on current evidence. And I'm going to share with you 5 of my top tips to help you start shifting your mindset from today. And to end with, I'm going to share a link that will allow you to book a place on my next Mindset Masterclass. So let's get started. Everybody talks about imposter syndrome. And I wondered, do you really know what a syndrome is? Well, here is the Oxford English Dictionary definition. It's a noun, and it's a word used to describe a group of symptoms which consistently occur together, or a condition characterized by a set of associated symptoms. Now, I do have a syndrome. I, like anybody who lives with one of these, can tell you what a syndrome is. I live with this one, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. It's a connective tissue disorder. And you know, I'm one of the most positive thinkers I know, but I cannot think myself out of Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I looked up syndromes and the letter I. And you know what? There's no imposter in there at all. There's the rather awful irritable bowel syndrome, which anybody who suffers with this will tell you, you can't think yourself out of that one either. All of these conditions have something in common. All of these require the people living with the syndrome to have a certain mindset if they want to cope with all the various symptoms and challenges that are posed by their syndrome. But our mindset isn't going to take away that syndrome. The great news is your imposter is not a syndrome. Your imposter is a mindset, and you create it yourself, usually with false evidence. Have you ever noticed how we lie consistently to ourselves? We tell ourselves stories about ourselves that keep us small and make us stop making progress. The best news of all about the mindset? Well, you can change it, just like a stage set, unlike a syndrome. Your own language is feeding your imposter. It's giving it ammunition that it then turns around and uses against itself. And that's you. And you can control these symptoms. You are absolutely an expert by now in your imposter. You know what triggers that voice and that behavior, and therefore you can control the symptoms. And today I'm going to share with you in just 1 hour how you can start to do that. So, why do I believe your imposter is a mindset? Well, when you look at open or closed mindset, the way people judge and explain how that works is they look at learning, feedback, challenges, and change. Now, the imposter, much like somebody with an open mindset, is open to learning from others. The difference here is that that voice often tells you they know more than you do, when in fact you are actually the expert. So being open to learning from others is invaluable. I hope we never stop being open to learning from others, but it's also important to acknowledge when we're actually the expert in the room. An imposter allows us, much like, again, an open mindset, to embrace feedback. The difference, though, is that imposter is looking for a chance to find the negative feedback and say, see, I told you that's what would happen. I told you if you put yourself out there, this would be the outcome. This would be what people thought. And it's looking for the opportunity to say, I can back this up with current proof I have failed again. Now, unlike the open mindset, somebody who's in their imposter mindset will look at a challenge and look at all the reasons why they are going to fail, particularly if it's a challenge where they're not absolutely regularly performing the tasks required. And then, of course, on some days, it's where they are regularly performing those tasks. Because the thing about the imposter is very often it will rear its head when it's actually something you know you're flipping brilliant at. And change, well, change is very, very scary to the imposter. Change constantly goes back to the past and says, don't change, because look at what happened when you tried to do that the last time. Of course, this is where it's a big fibber again, because it's very rare that the evidence it's looking at was actually last time. Often it was that time you were 4 or 11 in class and put your hand up and were made to feel stupid. So your fears, as often is the case, are based on evidence that is not real. And all of those lies, all of those stories that do not serve us and are not current, keep feeding the imposter. That beautiful drawing is done by an amazing friend of mine, Amanda Rose, and I will share with you later how you can contact her. But I spoke to her about how it's this historical drama that we create, this idea that everything that ever went wrong or made us look less than we had hoped in the past stays with us and we carry it. She's portrayed it beautifully in the bags that we carry the baggage, as I would call it. And it's those past embarrassments. It's the times we said or did or felt less. And that historical drama becomes a hysterical drama. We over-egg every mistake we've ever made. And the imposter feeds and feeds on that and constantly loves to remind us. But that evidence is so out of date. What stories do you find that you're telling yourself? What stories from your past regularly make it into your day and constantly influence the present or even the future? What stories do you remind yourself of before important meetings? Are you one of those people who looks forward with dread to something you have to do on a regular basis because of the story you tell yourself about it? And when it comes to the future, well, probably you're stopping short of actually wanting to really look at what that might be. Because every time you start, the voice of the imposter takes over and tells you why the past and the present are going to stop you from doing it. This is a self-portrait of Amanda. This is her imposter when I came to her and said, hey, I'm putting a book together, I'd love some illustrations, I'm talking about the whole mindset and how it impacts all of our lives. And as a very close friend, she said, of course, I would love to do that for you. And she said she then found herself looking at her illustrations and telling herself why none of them were good enough. Her own imposter moment. She's very talented, incredibly creative, and a beautiful, wonderful human being. I'd love you to follow her, and I'd love you to let her know if you enjoy her drawings. I know it would mean a lot to her. So I'm going to share with you some of my top tips on how you could change your mindset. My first tip is about becoming the director of your set. This to me is a real wake-up moment. It's the moment when you realise that if you're the director and this is your production, you're actually behaving like someone at a rehearsal. That's what your imposter does. Your imposter keeps you in a place where it feels nobody's going to notice your limitations. You're in that space where you can stay small. But the thing is, when we become the director of our set and actually own it, that's the moment where we can change it. My condition, the syndrome I mentioned that I live with, Ehlers-Danlos, means that the first thing I notice as I wake up every morning is the pain I'm in. And for a lot of years, that would set the tone for my day. My mindset was set, and it was set in a place of misery, anger, anguish, pain, self-pity, and very often stagnation and not moving forward. Now, I can't stop Ehlers-Danlos and I can't stop the pain, but I can decide whether it sets my mindset for the day. So I took ownership and decided I would start every day by allowing my body to recover before I stood up and put it under pressure, before I stretched it to the point where I could say, see, I can't, I told you, this body can't cope with this, and I'd climb back into bed. So instead, I allow, I know that sounds like oh, good on you, but I allow my gorgeous husband every morning to bring me coffee in bed. And during the time it takes me to drink that, I am slowly allowing my body to adjust to the day and to no longer get a big percentage of the set in my head. I have taken ownership. I have become the director, and I own my mindset. So how can you start to become your own director? Well, the first thing to do is to own it from the moment you start your day. If you're still one of those people who says things like, I'm not a morning person, that's your imposter talking. That's your imposter saying, just don't go there. Stay here, be cozy, don't engage with others. You might show a weakness or say something wrong. And then it spins you a story. So how about owning every morning how you are going to be that day? I have a really simple way of describing this. Choose your mood. Choose it for the day, and then decide as the director of this set, what does that look like? What does that mean? What does that require you to be? And how can you support yourself to direct that set today? I often write it down on a post-it and carry that around with me so that in a moment of wobble, I can look at the post-it, remind myself, why did I choose that mood today? What was I hoping it would achieve? And very quickly, you're back in that space. Decide what and who belong in your timeline or on your set. A lot of us spend a lot of time online and we think of timelines as something we flick through on a screen. But your whole life is your timeline. And when you treat it that way, when you can own it and say, in my production, these people bring only drama or crisis or negativity or doubt, or they feed me to feed my imposter, it's time to decide they don't belong in your timeline. So decide how you can start reducing their presence or their impact. It's usually you that has to own that and do that. You're the director, remember? So mute people. Don't agree to go to meetings with people just to be seen if they're not your people. Don't spend time on a social media platform clutching your head and tutting and getting upset at how aggressive and unpleasant people have become. Go somewhere else. But owning it, noticing it, and deciding, do they belong in my set, will have a big impact. And you can start that today. And then at the end of the day, I'd love you to take 5 minutes to notice, what impact has this had on me today? What impact did it have to set my mood, to change the people I allowed into my set? How has that made me feel, be, and talk to myself? Now, this second tip is really crucial. Saying things out loud have a very different reaction for us than when we keep them in our head. I would urge you, really urge you, to notice where you are before you say these things out loud. But I would also urge you to notice that very often our imposter chooses moments when it would be difficult for us to challenge it. So do it, be brave, even if there's a risk somebody may hear you. Go for it and start speaking out loud. I'm quite sure that there are people in our community who walk the dog every day and go past our little window towards the woods, who hear some very strange woman standing in her bathroom. Admittedly, they don't know it's my bathroom, but standing in the bathroom and saying, really, really, are you actually going to have this same conversation? Do you not know where it leads? And that's me talking out loud to the things my imposter has said to me. And when I hear the words, when I actually hear what I say to myself, I'm very often quite astonished. Firstly, because they're just not true. But secondly, because they're almost always really quite unkind. One of my real heroes, Brené Brown, says, talk to yourself as though you were talking to someone you love. If I had ever said the things to those I love to myself, I would be in a really great place, because the things we say to those we love are said with thought and care and kindness. Have you noticed how even when you have to tell someone you love something that could be negative, you do it with care? But how often do you apply that same rule to yourself? Saying these things out loud will help you to change the lines that you've chosen. So how can you do that? Well, this is something that comes from CBT, cognitive behavioral theory. And it's a process that really works. And I urge you to give this a go. It takes 3 weeks because it takes 21 days or possibly even longer, but at least 21 days for us to be able to create a new pathway in our brain to change this behavior. So I'd like you to think about something you tell yourself often. And yes, it's probably in the voice of your imposter. And I'd like you to think, actually, I'm ready to change that. It doesn't serve me. I don't like saying it to myself. I would love to replace that with something else. My particular one that I tried this on, because I wanted to do this myself before I ever shared it with clients, was something that I tried again recently. Because of my condition, I've lost a couple of teeth and I'm very conscious of it. And I can't wear dentures because of my condition, and I can't have implants. So I have to adapt and get used to it. So week 1, I was saying to myself, I have to stop work that requires me to present to others because I have lost a tooth. And I said that to myself out loud every day for a whole week. And at the beginning of week 2, I knew that I had to replace that with a truth that meant I could own it, that might feel a bit uncomfortable to start with, but I could really give this my best shot. And so for week 2, I had to say, I've got to stop presenting to other people because I have lost a tooth. And then I can continue to present and to show everyone that being imperfect is exactly who we all are. And in week 3, I could drop that negative message that I had been feeding myself and just say, I can continue to present and to show everyone that all of us are imperfect. So I'd like you to gift yourself that 3 weeks. What is that one thing that constantly holds you back, that you've told yourself means you have to stop where you are? 1 week of repeating it every day. Week 2, you're going to add something to replace it with. And week 3, you're going to own what you have replaced it with. And I'd love to know how you get on with that. Number 3, every actor, every playwright, every producer and every director will scream no at this. And I scream yes at this. You need to read your reviews. Your imposter is terrified of your reviews because your reviews prove that it's telling you lies. You can't see it because I can. I'm looking behind this camera at a beautiful wall in my office. It's my thank you wall. Almost the entire wall is covered with letters and cards and pictures and notes. And each of them contains those 2 words, thank you. They're there for me to remind my imposter that I'm good at what I do, that I've made a difference when people needed me to. Some of them are thanking me for my coaching work. Some of them are thanking for my work as a celebrant. And some are from people who've stayed in our little woodland retreat, thanking me for giving them back their peace and calm. And they all remind me that when that voice in my head tells me I am not enough, I can give it new evidence and tell it to sit down and shut up. So how can you do that? Well, I'd first of all encourage you to create your own thank you wall. Start with one note, one card. Mine started with a post-it note. I have on my wall cards from friends and family and clients, but all of them started with just one on a big blank wall. So don't allow that silly voice to start saying, oh, you can't do a wall. I've got a lot of years in this wall. You have to start with a blank wall and one card. Then go on to that place where people have reviewed you. If you're lucky enough to have had reviews for your work on LinkedIn, go and look at them. How often do you actually look? Because somebody took the trouble to say, you did a great job. You made a difference. There's more evidence that when your imposter is telling you you're not ready, you're not enough, you can go and look and remind yourself, I have these skills. And you know, the other thing I would do while you're there is look back through your years of experience at work and remember what they count for. And you know, if you're lacking in thank yous and feedback, it's time to start asking for it. You know that beautiful saying from the Kevin Costner movie, if you build it, they will come. Field of Dreams, that's from. Well, here's the thing. In most of the things you do in life, they won't. You ask anybody who runs a business who's built a website, it doesn't mean anybody will come. You have to do all the things to get them to come. Well, this is the same. Just because you do a great job does not mean everybody will rush to tell you. Sometimes you have to ask for the feedback. And sometimes you will be beautifully and pleasantly surprised by just what a difference you made. And then you need to sit with this evidence and review it. And you need to review it quite regularly. You need to remind your voice that actually it's being a bit historical and somewhat hysterical because current evidence, and these reviews are that evidence, tell a very different story. Number 4, well, this is my favourite topic really. This is language. There's that beautiful saying, whether I think I can or I think I can't, I'm probably right. Well, you know what? The lines you tell yourself, the words, the language, the stories, they get boring. And it's time to learn some new ones. I like to think of this a bit like learning a new language. And the way I first did this, and I'm going to suggest you do this, is I picked the words I wanted to keep and the words I wanted to get rid of. And I'd love you to start writing down the things your imposter says that you don't want to keep repeating, but also to add in some things you'd like to add to your language. So the way I would do that is start by writing a list of words or phrases that you would love to use about yourself, but you know what, I'm just not quite there. It just feels that little bit uncomfortable or not really authentic. But maybe if I push myself in the future, they might. Write them down. Put them in a vocabulary book. Do you remember those from school? We used to have these funny little long, thin books. And you'd put a line down the middle, and on one side was the word in English, and on the other side was the word in the new language you were learning. For me, it was a French vocab book. Well, I'd love you to do the same. And instead of it meaning the same thing, it's going to mean something different. It may even be the direct opposite of the word you currently use. But if you could start to believe But you know what? I could use one of these every month and just start to see how it feels to put it into my language. It has an impact really quickly. And these words or phrases are going to need to be things that you use every day. Don't pick something that very rarely comes up for you. Pick something you use pretty much every day. And at the end of the month, pick a different one. Building that new language is going to take time. And as anyone will tell you when you're learning a new language, you have to practice. So you've got to keep using the words, no matter how uncomfortable they may feel to begin with. Yeah. Not very subtle, but the easiest way I could put this one across. Start today. This is the performance of your life. It is not a rehearsal. You do not get a do-over. You do not get a chance to say, could we try that from a different angle, or with different lighting, or with a different set?